All right, so this is the last, remember, this is the last worksheet that we're going to do before the test. All right, so this will be on the test. What's that? A new mic? No, I'm just using the mic on the, because, I don't know, we use that mic for something in video, and I just never put it back in my bag, and I got too lazy, and I thought, you know what, it's a lot easier not hooking the mic up, so I just went without the mic. All right, it's not quite as good a quality, but you can still hear it fine. All right, so absolute value equations. Do you remember doing absolute value? Did we do absolute value in here at all? I don't think we did. But they're doing it now, actually, the guys that are staying with the book. So, so here it is. Here's what absolute value looks like. Actually, yeah, we'll just do that. Okay, x could mean any number at all, but let's basically talk about what absolute value is. Remember back in your Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 days, you did number lines? Okay, just put a 0 right there. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. This has to do with absolute values, right? We're not going to graph the absolute values. I think you guys, Carter, do I have you guys graph an absolute value in there? Yeah, I don't know. Was that part of the lesson so far? I can't remember what it was. Is it the next one? Okay, yeah, eventually I think we do that. But with you guys, I don't think we're going to graph these. We're just trying to figure out what they are, okay? So let's talk about what absolute value is. So basically, absolute value means how far is a number away from 0? Okay, what is the distance? Now, when we do distance, you don't really talk about positive, negative. Like if I said, how far is it from here to the back of the room, and you were to measure it, you wouldn't say, oh, it's negative 17 feet, would you? All right, you would just say it's what? 17 feet. So if I ask for a distance, distance is always positive, okay? So absolute value is kind of like that. So if distance is always positive, what's absolute value? It's always positive. Exactly right. So if I asked you, if I was here at 3 and I asked you, how far is it from 3 to 0? Use a different, let's do this, make it a little thicker. All right, so if I said, how far is it from 3 to 0? Let's not even put an arrow on there, let's put a dot. Okay, how far is that line? What's the length of that line? It's 3, isn't it? Okay, what if I came over here and I started at -3 instead of +3, and I said, I want to go to 0. I should have done that in a different color. Let's see if I can do that in a different color. Okay. All right. So what if I asked you what the length or what the distance is from -3 to 0? How long is that line?
6.
The blue one is 6. That's why I made it different colors. The blue one, it's 3, isn't it? Okay. It doesn't matter which direction you're going. It just matters how far you go. Okay. How far you've gone. So that's what absolute value. If you can think of that, if you can keep that in your head, what does absolute value mean? It means the distance, the length, how far, okay, it is from one thing to another. That's what it basically means, okay? So if I did this, and those little bars right there on the outside, see how you got those little bars? That means absolute value. That's the symbol for it, all right? So what if I said this? What if I asked you what the absolute value of -3 is? How far is -3 away from 0? How far?
3.
It's, oops, let's show something else. It's 3. Exactly right. What if I asked you this? What if I asked you the absolute value of +3? What's that? It's also 3. That's kind of weird because a negative equals a positive. It's not really a negative, okay? It's where it is on the number line and how far that number is, that point is from 0. That's basically what we're doing for absolute value. Everybody got that? So if I said if I said start at 0, I forget what I was going to say. That didn't really work out. It was in my head, but it's not going to work out. Let's do this. What if I said this? What if I said -2 plus 1? All right, we'll make it super easy. and then put it in absolute value. What if I ask you to solve for that? So here's the key. Everybody watching? This thing right here, always do what's inside the absolute value first. Don't go inside there and say, oh, everything's positive, so I make the -2 positive and make the 1 positive. All right, don't do that. Do the work first, and then you can apply the absolute value to it. Does that make sense? Almost, it's kind of acting like parentheses, kind of, except at the very end, that absolute value symbol does something. It could change my answer. Okay, it could keep it the same. So what is this? What's -2 plus 1? It's -1. But it's in absolute value, so what's the absolute value of -1? It's +1. So that's the answer to this problem right here. Everybody see that? So you just work the problem, and you come up with an answer. Pretty simple. Agree? Okay. What if I did this? And I ask you to solve for x. Okay? I ask you to solve for it. So let's think a little bit. All right? The absolute value of what number is going to give you 5? Okay? So you could say x equals -5. Or you could say x could also be what? A +5. Because if I had a 5 inside of here, then x could also be a +5. Would you agree? So you actually get 2 answers for absolute value. All right? When I ask you to solve for it, okay, if it's a variable, if it's an x or an m or an n or whatever they use right there, if it's a variable, I can actually get 2 different answers. Because if I take the absolute value of -5, what do I get? 5. If I take the absolute value of +5, what do I get? I get 5. Everybody with me? A lot of people, especially when they're younger, they get absolute value mixed up. Some people think you always change the sign. Do you always change the sign? No. You do sometimes, okay? If it was negative, then you would change the sign. But if it's positive, it just stays positive. Agreed? Okay. So make sure it's not only changing the sign. It does sometimes, but it doesn't other times, right? It always makes it what? Positive. Everybody clear? All right. So now let's do some problems. I'll just start with number 1. I always like starting there. It's usually the easiest. Not always, but it usually is on these worksheets. So all right. What about this? Now look what we did before.
Did you divide by 6?
You could, here's, let me think of a good way to do this. You could say, I could just show you how to do it, but I'm trying to think of a good explanation right here. I don't know if this will work or not. I can't. It's been years since I've taught absolute. Well, it was last year I taught absolute value, but haven't done it in a long time since then. So you could do this. When you see, let's do this again. When you see this, you could do this. You could say x equals 5, and you can also say that -x equals 5. Does that make sense? Because if I put a -x inside there, the absolute value would be +5. So what's my answer? If I divide by a -1, divide by a -1, so x is what? -5. You see that? So we're going to do the same thing that we did here to this. So what could 6m be? 6m, positive 6m could be what? 42, right? And I don't like the way I explain that right here. Let's just show you. Then you could also say 6m. Let's do it that way. Nope, we're going to do it like this. You put a negative, right? Let's make this negative. And that could also equal what? 42. Because if I took this, stuck it inside that absolute value, then I'd still get a 42, wouldn't I? All right? I could take a positive, put it in here. I could take a negative, put it in here. They're both going to come out to +42. So let's see what m could possibly be. So we're going to divide by 6, divide by 6. That's the easy part. So m is what? 7. And
negative.
That's right, because you divide by what? -6 this time. And so m could also be -7. The answer to the absolute value cannot be a negative, okay? But the variable itself could be a negative, because when I take the absolute value of a negative number, I'm going to get a positive answer, okay? All right, so that's what we're basically going to do. All right, so we're going to take whatever's in there. We'll take a positive version of it. We'll take the negative version of it, and we'll set it equal to whatever they set it equal to. Okay? Let's do another one. Should have taken notes on this before I taught it, because it's been a long time since I taught this. Let's do number 3. They use K. I hate writing a K, so I'm going to write an X minus 10 equals 3. All right. So what are we going to do? Let's just write it out like it is right now, okay? And we're not going to change anything. We're just going to go x minus 10 equals 3. That's the easiest thing to do, okay? Put a little and right there. Now, what are we going to do with that x minus 10 now? I'm going to make it what?
Negative.
I'm going to make it negative. So I'm going to do this. Everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm just going to keep it the same. And then I'm going to make this thing negative, because if I take the absolute value of it, it's still going to come out to be a 3. Right? But putting the negative gives us actually 2 different answers. So the first one's easy. We pretend we don't even have the absolute value there. All right? So I just write it as if the absolute value was not there. That's easy. Plus 10 plus 10. X is 13. That's one answer. What about this right here? What do we have to do here? I made this negative. I put this in parentheses because you got to make both of those negatives, right? So this is going to be negative x, what? Plus 10 equals 3. Subtract a 10. You could put the x on the right-hand side if you wanted to, but let's just keep it on the left. Minus 10 minus 10. And we get... Wait a minute. Hold up. I screwed up. No, I didn't. I'm right. I just did my math wrong in my head. All right. So I'm going good. Here we go. I'm on a roll. So we got negative x equals... What's 3 minus 10? That's supposed to be a 3. It's negative 7, isn't it? All right. And so x is going to be what? Divide by negative 1. I don't have to show that. I showed that over there. It's just 7. So I get 2 different answers. Let's see, how in the world could I get two different answers for this? How could both of those things make this thing true? Well, let's plug them in, right? Plug and chug. Now, I don't even need the number line, okay? I'm just going to plug them in and see if it works. Everybody follow me? So let's plug the first one in. First one should be good. 13. 13 minus 10 is what? 3. Absolute value of 3 is 3. Let's put the 7 in now. This is the one that's a little bit trickier, all right? I mean, it's not tricky to plug back in, but it's unusual to get 2 answers. We got that when we had quadratics, didn't we? Remember that? But at this point, we don't really know about quadratics, right? If you just went by the worksheets that we started. But anyway, let's put it back in. Let's put a 7 in for this. So 7 minus 10. What's 7 minus 10? It's negative 3.
Oh, but the absolute value is 30.
But it's inside an absolute value. Exactly right. So what's the absolute value of negative 3? It's positive 3. Do both of these work? Absolutely. So you need both of them. All right? They're both our solutions to this equation right here. And you need both answers. So you can't just have one, expect to get it right. You got to have them both. We got it? Let's do another one. We'll do 2 more, actually, and then we'll be done. This is Wednesday, isn't it? Quarter after? Is that right? Okay. If we have time. Hopefully we'll have time. Let's do this. 7. This is number 7. All right. So it's 7, and then absolute value of x equals 56. This is actually a little easier than what we just finished doing, I think. That 7's not inside the absolute value. So I don't have to make that 7 negative because it's not inside the absolute value. So what do I do with that 7 then? What is that 7 doing to this number right here? It's being multiplied. So how do I get rid of it? Divide. That's right. So I divide by a 7. All right. So what do I get? This is still absolute value. Okay. It's 8. So what's my answer? Is it just 8? It's x equals positive 8 and what? Negative 8. Let's actually put it in order from smallest to greatest. You could put plus or minus if you wanted to. Okay. If you wanted to put plus or minus 8, that'd be fine with me. If you wanted to write x equals 8 and then x equals negative 8 and circle them both, you could do that as well. Or if you want to circle them individually, that's fine. You got a lot of choices on how to write that. Let's do one more and we'll be done. Let's do number 12. This is pretty much the same kind of problem. It's pretty close to the same, except instead of the absolute value multiplying by 7, what are you doing? Dividing it. So how do I get rid of something that's being divided? I multiply. So I multiply by 7, come over here and multiply that by, that's not a 35. Well, it is, but it shouldn't be. I was doing that in my head, I think, before. Yeah, it should be just a 5. Sorry about that. So, yeah, that's probably why I wrote down 35. So equals 7, right? Cancel. So the absolute value of x equals 35. So that means x is equal to what? It's not just 35. It's negative 35 and positive 35. Remember, with the absolute value, you're going to get 2 answers. So don't just rely on one. If you want to write it like that, you can. If you want to write plus or minus, you can. If you want to write x equals negative 35, x equals positive 35, that's fine as well. Everybody good?
Yes.
All right, I think you should be fine on this. Again, only 18 problems with this, and I've done 4 of them for you. All right, that was nice. Yep. 18 problems. All right. Let me give that to you, and then it'll be time for class to be over.